Hey there, this is the unretired engineer coming at you again to talk a little bit about batteries, EVs, and what's going on in the world. So, if you like this content or my content on sci fi and other topics, hit the like and the subscribe. And if you have any comments, drop them in the comments. So, basically, the technology really has lapped the argument regarding batteries. Everyone is talking about the EV retreat. Much of what you're hearing is political theater. It's not the reality of the situation. The loudest voice is saying that EVs are failing, mandates, DES product failing, market retreating. It's mostly social theatre, a base that's learned to hate the mandate era, and they haven't really dropped it yet. The anti-EV drum is a useful to political coalition, and so they do lean into that, but it's really different from industrial policy. And meanwhile, the engineers have kept on pushing forward hard, making huge strides in many areas. So the regulatory correction that we're seeing is that the heavy-handed mandate era is over. It was always unaffordable, always going to fail, and that, honestly, it's good riddance. The previous administrations have mandated and put sub-Ds timelines and then handed those to people who didn't understand what the heck it all really meant and that you can't magic this into existence. So, that pressure was never sustainable. It wasn't driving the right product mix. We've talked about that before. But what is replacing it is closer to let the market work and the more defensible position that was there all along and that should have been what was the main focus, even if there had been some other thrusts that were probably reasonable. But regulatory loosening isn't anti-EV, it's just anti-mandates. It's just doing the thing that's logical and affordable at the government level. So, there is really a policy thread through here that is important to remember and is often conflated and confused. Tariffs that are used today have always been used, by the way. It's not a new thing. They're not necessarily about EVs. They're about not letting Chinese overcapacity create a U.S. industry. China is a state-subsidized industrial powerhouse in manufacturing. They have massive overcapacity, but they do have genuine technical maturity because of that investment. And BYD have LFP packs at $81 a kilowatt hour versus in the US, we're having a hard time getting below $120 a kilowatt hour. That is a structural gap, and it's not temporary given their huge market and America's relatively modest market. So tariffs are a legitimate state tool of industrial policy to protect the industry and to protect the workers within that industry. And it's separate from the EV cultural war that's been going along. And the same way, they slow the bleeding. They don't really end the issue. There still has to be hard work in the industrial hardware by the commercial companies to do the right thing while they have that protection. The engineers, as I said, have kept working. We've had all of this crap going on and off. You've had companies invest millions, billions really, in new battery infrastructure and all the rest of it, and they rushed to market with technologies which were very good at the time, but they knew were going to be advancing in the future. And so they have often baked in the technology at a level that is not as good as what other people have. The two real objections to EV adoption, range and charge time, were things that have been worked on very hard. The range has really been solved, though there is always a range cost thing. And then, as I discussed, a time before, reality is, do you really need 400 miles of range on a relatively small EV that you're only going to be using for commuting and the occasional shorter road trip? There's kind of a trade-off there that does make sense. But one of the big things that's continued to be an issue is charge time. And the reality is again, that has started to fall. CATL just announced their lithium-ion pack, where they go from 10% to 80% of charge for a long-range car in 5 minutes. So essentially, not much different from what you can do at the gas pump, and they do it with a lifetime which is as good or better than existing lithium-ion packs. So that is another major breakthrough, another sign pointing to the fact that no, the technology wasn't right 5 years ago. It is probably about right today, and tomorrow it'll be even better, right? Technology in this area still has a long way to advance, whereas the gas engine reached a plateau, quite a while ago. And yes, you can still push it, but the more you push it, the more you tend to drive things like you have turbos, which are unreliable, et cetera, et cetera. So, the cost curve, is still on the downslope. So it won't be long before EVs will be fully aligned with gas cars as far as a lot of that's concerned, particularly as the EV ramps up and the ICE engine starts to fade. So, you can really see a lot of the technical case against EV is now really gone. So, but, once you've built up political momentum, you, particularly in social politics, people tend to stay on their at the dais yelling at each other a lot long beyond the point at which it makes any sense any longer. Social politics moves on when the machine finds a new topic that they can flatten from a nuanced into a yes/no thing they can yell back and forth. So it is going to happen, and they'll drop this one. But for now, we still have a bit of the hangover from the old. The regulatory environment is normalizing. The tariff question is real, but it's very separate and something that you don't just throw away because, it's suddenly you no longer care about EVs. We do care about EVs, and the tariffs serve a purpose. There is really no deep quitting. If you look at what the car companies are bringing forward, they're finally fixing one of the primary problems, which was the product mix and the fact that they overemphasized super expensive vehicles and then vehicles in categories where EV doesn't work as well, like a large truck, which is very heavy and is used to tow, which means that it has a large battery, which in itself is heavy, and then means the vehicle it has a lower range, and then that means a bigger battery. The vicious circle when you're talking about something like a pickup truck or a minivan is really savage. Whereas when you reach a mid-range car, it's pretty good, and then a smaller car is even better. So you kind of turn the vicious circle into a virtuous circle as you go down. And that's why e-bikes make a lot of sense right today, whereas an e-truck is still struggles. So, by the time the U.S. political environment resolves this, the engineering is going to be a generation ahead. Fortunately, we have people who are forward-looking. We have companies which are able to sustain some of this, even though they struggle. So they are moving. But the technology has lapped the argument, and almost nobody noticed while that was happening. So always very interesting at the when technology and society and politics meet. It's often kind of a really messy, ugly story. So that's the view from the unretired engineer. Cheers, and I'll be talking to you next week. Thanks.